Today I'm here to talk about a topic called willpower. The reason this came about is I was catching up with Quentin a couple of weeks ago and we seemed to be reading some of the same books, and I explained to him that I'd done a little bit of research on this area and we both felt that this would be an interesting topic for a room like this. What I do know about a room like this is that a lot of you are doing some hard things now in your real estate business that you're not seeing sort of immediate returns for, but you're doing it because you believe that in the future the hard work you're putting in now is going to return for you some kind of positive result. So that's pretty much what willpower is about. It's doing the stuff now that we should be doing. The reason I got really interested in this topic really happened a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, when I was about to become a father. And at that time, I thought it would be good to start to think about the things that maybe a father should be doing in order to maybe try and mold this new little human being that would be coming into the world. So it got me thinking about what characteristics and traits and attributes that I wanted that child to have. And then it got me thinking about, hang on a second, do I have these attributes? Do I have these things? And it started me down this path of a little bit of research on this topic. So what is willpower? Willpower is basically, well, there's a couple of definitions, but I really like this one. And it is simply this: doing what you know you should do, even when you don't feel like it. Let me be the first to say that I am not a master of willpower. I'm not an expert in this regard. But imagine for a second that today you did everything that you knew that you should have done. Or let's look back at the last week or the last year, okay? How different do you think your life would have been if you did everything that you thought you should be doing? How much faster would you achieve your goals? How much more efficient would you be? How would the relationships that you have and the communication you have be affected? This is basically the thing that we're trying to pursue. The interesting thing about this particular topic of willpower is it's been referred to as the master aptitude, meaning that if you can develop and grow this particular thing, it can actually impact every part of your life, okay, in a positive way. So, like I said, I'm not an expert on this particular topic, but I've done a lot of reading, listening, and watching. Here's a couple of the books that I've read and listened to. A couple of the ones that are interesting for this room is this one here in the middle. It's called The One Thing. It was actually written by Gary Keller, who one of the founders of Keller Williams in real estate. This book here, it's called What Matters Most. That was actually written by a friend of mine. His name's Brian Scrone. Brian wrote his book around 5 topics, 5 facets of life, and he calls them the 5 F's. And they are faith, fitness, finance, family, and friends. And every 90 days I meet up with Brian and a couple of people, and we track how we've been in those 5 aspects of our life, and then we make a plan for the next 90 days as to how we're going to approach those 5 things in our life. We set goals along the lines of what Quentin was referring to before. It's a great way to move forward and measure. And another Brian that I listen to quite a lot is this guy here. His name is Brian Johnston, and he runs an amazing website called Optimize. If you want to look it up, it's called optimize.me. And this gentleman has read over 400 books, and he has summarized these books into videos, PDFs, and audio. So for busy people, it's an amazing resource. I listen to them driving and whatever the case. I have and I've read most of these books, but some of them I don't have, and some of them I've listened to the summaries. So one of those books was called The Marshmallow Test, and some of you might have heard of this, and this is actually one of the first books I read which really got me interested in this idea of willpower. About 50 years ago, a psychologist, Walter Mischel, did a test at Stanford University. And what he did is he took preschool-age kids and put them in a room, and he went up to them and he gave them a marshmallow. And he said to them, "You can eat this marshmallow now, but if you can wait for a little while, I'll come back with another marshmallow. And if you haven't eaten this one, you get to eat 2. Now these kids are 4 and 5 years old, okay? So they look like this, right? You can imagine the pain and anguish that they went through during that period of time. And of course, some of them managed to do it and some of them didn't. The majority, I guess, didn't. Guess how long he left them? Now, these kids are 5 or 4. How old? So how long? 10 minutes? 20 minutes. That's a long time. I can't get my kids to sit still for 20 minutes doing anything. Right? But 20 minutes. So the interesting thing and the cool thing about this is it was done 50 years ago. So for our benefit now, they've traced these people to see what has happened to them in their life and, seeing how maybe their ability to delay gratification has affected their lives. So what they found is that the ones who were able to delay gratification at, say, school age or high school learning were able to pass the standardized testing a lot easier than their colleagues. And a lot of that didn't have to do with IQ. So something I learned in studying willpower is that willpower outrates IQ by a factor of 2 when it comes to academic performance. So it really is, if you put the work in, you will achieve those results in those standardized tests. I think that's quite amazing. And I think we all know unrewarded geniuses out there and people with average abilities who just work twice as hard and are successful. But they tracked these people into adulthood. They found that they were in more stabilized relationships. They dealt with frustrations better. They had a lower BMI, so they were healthier overall. And they did brain scans in their adult brains, and they found that the areas of the brain that controlled things such as obesity and addiction were basically better in these people who had the ability to delay gratification. So some pretty profound things found in this little test. One of my favorite comments from Walter Mischel on this was that there was a little girl who got the marshmallow and ate the middle and put it back. And, these are his words, that girl grew up to become a lawyer. Okay. Also, and you know how I said I started on this path to try and look at, how can I help develop my kids? Anybody here have kids? Keep your hand up if you like them. Yeah, okay. Most of you. What I knew about, what I thought I was getting into is, developing this human. The reality is the first year of my children's life, I can't remember. I was just keeping them alive. I remember on my child's first birthday, I gave my wife a high five and said, she survived, right? Because that's what the first year of parenting is about. But now that they're sort of 3 and 5 years old, we're implementing a little bit of this sort of delayed gratification. We're doing things that we think are going to help them in this regard. This is the thing for those parents out there who are trying to help their kids. The question is, he's saying arguably the best answer to the question, what can we do to help our children, is to model what you would like them to become. So just be who you'd like them to be. Okay, so what are the things that we can do in order to improve our willpower? Well, there's 4 physiological things that you can actually do to impact your willpower quotient. They are sleep, meditation, physical exercise, and a healthy diet. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably looking at that and going, okay, hang on, if I do these things, then my willpower will improve. But I actually need willpower to do these things. Am I wrong? So, the really interesting thing here is that, and the good news here is that you don't have to master all of these things at the same time. And it's just quite often choosing the one thing that will start you down this path. Interestingly, an impact in one of these areas of your life has a positive influence on the 3 other areas of your life. So the way I see it is kind of like a coal-powered train. If it's standing still, you've got to work a little hard to get it moving. But once it's up and moving, you've got to just give it a little bit of coal every now and then to keep it moving down the track. And it's just choosing the one thing that you think is, and the reference here is the one domino. If you can push that one thing over, how does that one thing then positively affect the other things in your life? So when I read this, I knew immediately for me that it was sleep. Okay? I used to sleep like a baby until I had a baby, right? I used to sleep 8 or 9 hours a night, and now I'll sleep about half that. maybe a little more, actually. There was a period it was half that. I knew I had to deal with that, and about a year and a half in, we consulted with a sleep consultant. It was the best $400 I ever spent, right? And things got back on track. But when things went off the rails, or prior to things going off the rails, I was eating well and I was working out. And as soon as the sleep stopped, all I could do was drag myself to my desk to get through my day. And I wasn't making very conscious decisions about what I would eat, or didn't care very much about my body. I was just looking forward to getting back to bed at some time, right? And I think anybody who's been a parent can really relate to that. But sleep is definitely a key factor. Meditation. I can tell you that this is one thing that I have continuously and will continue to struggle with. My friend Brian, who wrote that book, What Matters Most, referenced what the Buddhists say about the mind, and they reference it as a monkey that has been stung by a scorpion. If you can imagine that that's sometimes what's going on in your brain, and how active things are in there, and how we often react because maybe we're so occupied with the other things that are going on there. If there's some things that we can do to quiet the mind, that would be a good thing. And I think for quite a long time, meditation has been looked at as something that's kind of something for hippies, maybe immeasurable. But now it can be measured. They have scientifically measured the effects of meditation on the human brain. And amazingly, this is what they have found. The prefrontal cortex, which controls the issues around willpower, over a 10-week period where people have only meditated for 10 minutes a day, they have dramatically improved the size of their prefrontal cortex, as well as the density, as well as the connections within there. And as you can imagine, I mean, we'd all like a bigger brain, especially if it was able to help us with this number one most important aptitude of willpower. Physical exercise, I think we all understand that. That's important. And a low GI plant-based diet. So about a year and a half ago, my wife and I made a pretty dramatic change in our diet. And it's probably easier to list the things that we could eat than not, but in terms of what we couldn't or what we can't, it would be sugar, anything bread, pasta, rice-based, anything that contains sugar. So that included alcohol, and that was hard. When that became public knowledge, you'll probably know I'm Australian, so I got a call from the Australian Council saying I had to surrender my passport. But anyway, life goes on. Okay, this was a really interesting study. They put some people into an fMRI machine to study their brain, and they asked them this question. Imagine yourself, and a part of their brain lit up. Then they asked the question, imagine a stranger, and a different part of their brain lit up. The next question was, imagine your future self. And in some people, this part, the stranger part, lit up. And in other people, their current self lit up. In the majority, it was the stranger. Okay? Willpower is about doing the hard things now that are going to benefit your future self. If we don't have a strong link or understanding of who our future self is, it's going to be much harder for us to give up those sacrifices or make those sacrifices now. Because why would we do that if we're just benefiting a stranger, right? So these are the things that I guess we need to consider in regards to how do we better visualize our future self in today. So what we want, what we hope is that there is an overlap. And like I said earlier, the majority of you in the room are making sacrifices for your future self. But there are many people out there who aren't. There are some things that we can do to make that link a little bit stronger. This 10-10-10, it's a very simple concept. Some of us might have challenges thinking about ourselves 25 years from now. Okay, it's a hard thing to visualize. But I bet every one of us could imagine what we're going to be like in 10 minutes, right? 10 hours and 10 days. Right? And it's about building that out to the 10 months, 10 years, and so on. It's about making those little leaps. I think all of us know 10 minutes. It's funny that the second 10 is 10 hours, right? And I think all of us go, well, that's easy. I know who I'm going to be in 10 hours. But imagine this. There's something good on TV, and you know you should go to bed, but you don't. And within about 8 hours, you've got to wake up. So even that little leap for some people is a challenge. So work on the little stuff and then start building towards the big stuff. Right? The next one I look at is 1, 5, and 25 years. Something to remember about, I guess, growth and self-development is that we often overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 5. So stretching that out to a 5-year goal is sometimes a good thing. And I don't know if anybody in the room has done a 5-year goal. I did one because I had to. I was actually at a rain event in 2011, and they said, don't come back tomorrow unless you've done your 5-year goal. So I'm like, oh God, I got to really do this. We found that list in 2016, 5 years later, and we had hit most of them. We'd smashed some of them. We were a little weak on some, but I think about 80% of them we'd actually hit because we put it on paper. But this 25-year idea is not an idea I'd ever come across. Again, this is an exercise I did with Brian. And this was a really powerful exercise. A letter from your future self, 25 years out, to yourself today, in terms of what you've achieved, who you've helped, and how your life has been in general. It's an amazing way to link. This here is pretty simple, pre-commitment. In legal terms, bright lines. Bright lines are in contracts where it's very clear what's expected of who. Bright lines is around, for example, giving up junk food. Sometimes you might say to yourself, okay, I'll only eat junk food when I really need to, or I'll only eat it sometimes. Let's say it's a 99%, I'm not going to eat it. The 99% is actually harder than the 100%. If you just say to yourself, like I have, I will never set foot in a McDonald's ever again, it makes the drive home past every McDonald's a lot easier without having to decide, is today the day I'm going to allow myself to pull in there? Right? For me, it was Boston creams at Tim Hortons. Okay. If then, these two are sort of mythological stories about a leader of a fleet of ships leading some people into battle. When they landed at their destination, ordered everybody to burn those ships. No retreat, there's no way back, only forward. Right? If then, I'll skip to, these are strategies. We're all going to falter along the way. Okay, we're all going to hiccup. And there are things to do, or we need to make decisions about how we're going to react when we fail. A really quick example of that is sleep. Some of us might wake up in the middle of the night and then not know what to do. Okay, one of those things you could do, I recommend, is read this book. That might help you. That's Quentin's property management toolbox. But honestly, stay away from your phone. Stay away from your phone. Stay away from the television. Your phone has access to Facebook, and that will just set off your dopamine centers and keep you awake. But mundane, boring things, I try to focus on deep breathing for a period, and if that doesn't work, I'll read a book, but I will not touch my phone, will not touch electronics. So if this happens, what will I do? Put that in place now. Failure and forgiveness. We're all going to fail. But what you need to remember is that you're not a failure, you're a person who has failed in a certain instance. They did a study where they invited some women who were on a diet into the room, and they gave them a donut, and they said, eat this donut. Then they took half the women away and told that half, hey, listen, you're human, it's okay. You were forced to do it, it wasn't really your fault. Now they brought the women back together, and these women were offered a bowl of candy, and they were told, eat as much as you want. The people who were told it was okay and had basically forgiven themselves ate 50% less candy than the ones who didn't have that message of forgiveness given to them. So failure is okay, but forgive yourself and move on. Okay, so I've got to wrap up here. But willpower, it's a master aptitude. Look after that, and you look after everything else. There's 4 physiological factors. That's sleep, meditation, exercise, and a decent diet. Try and link yourself to your future self. Pre-commitments, also called habits. Try and just put some stuff on autopilot. Forgiveness, super important. And marshmallows. So, the one message I'd like to leave with is, there are times at which eating the marshmallow that is in front of you is the right decision. And there are times when we must wait for the second. Willpower is giving you the choice. Okay, thank you, and have a good night.